Chris Evans stopped portraying Captain America in 2019, and yet his highest-grossing movie since then is yet another MCU movie. Evans ostensibly bowed out of the MCU when Steve Rogers retired at the end of Avengers Endgame after having lived a long life with Peggy Carter. Still, the conspicuous fact that the multiverse saga has featured MCU variants aplenty, a concept that was technically introduced in Avengers Endgame, has raised many eyebrows over the permanence of Steve Rogers' departure, especially now that Robert Downey Jr. is returning to the MCU as Doctor Doom. Whatever the case, Chris Evans would have everyone believe that he is happily retired from the MCU, as he continues to refute suggestions that he will return in a future MCU installment. It is no surprise that these suggestions are so rife, as Chris Evans' tenure as Steve Rogers is among the most celebrated within the MCU. Furthermore, there may be added incentive for Evans to return to the franchise, given his MCU roles are always his biggest money spinners. Chris Evans' highest-grossing post-Endgame role was in another MCU movie. Chris Evans portrayed Johnny Storm in Deadpool and Wolverine. Chris Evans has starred in 10 movies since Avengers Endgame was released in 2019, proving that, while the MCU may have supercharged his career, he is far from a one-trick pony. Among his most successful roles since he last portrayed Steve Rogers were as Ransom in 2019's Knives Out and as Buzz Lightyear in 2022's Lightyear. Global box offices for these movies pale in comparison to what Chris Evans' most recent MCU movies were taking in, with the last three taking over $1 billion apiece. 5 years after Chris Evans starred in Avengers Endgame, he went on to cameo as Johnny Storm in Deadpool and Wolverine. While Deadpool and Wolverine grossed less than half of Avengers Endgame's mind-blowing $2.7 billion, its $1.3 billion worldwide gross dwarfs everything that came between, with Evans' highest-grossing non-MCU movie, Free Guy, earning $323 million worldwide. Interestingly, even 2005's Fantastic Four, where he portrayed Johnny Storm for the first time, grossed more with $333 million total. Why Chris Evans' post-Endgame movies haven't been big box office hits. Half of Chris Evans' movies went straight to streamers. The performance of Chris Evans' post-Endgame movies are indicative of the MCU's continued profitability, even in the multiverse saga, which has played host to some of the MCU's lowest-grossing movies. Deadpool and Wolverine's $1.3 billion is an exceptionally high bar to clear, after all. Still, even Chris Evans' second highest-grossing movie after Avengers Endgame grossed less than the MCU's third lowest-grossing movie, Captain America: The First Avenger, and only surpassed The Incredible Hulk and The Marvels with its worldwide box office total. With that in mind, here are some reasons why Chris Evans' filmography falls short of MCU Chris Evans' movies were released on streaming platforms. The Red Sea Diving Resort, Ghosted, and Pain Hustlers were released straight to streaming platforms, while The Gray Man and Don't Look Up had limited theatrical releases before swiftly migrating to Netflix. While The Red Sea Diving Resort and Pain Hustlers were relatively underwhelming, receiving generally negative reviews from critics, Ghosted was Apple TV Plus's most-watched movie debut, and Don't Look Up was Netflix's second most-watched movie within 28 days. Nevertheless, high streaming viewership does not translate to a global box office. Chris Evans' highest-grossing non-MCU movies were original properties, while the MCU benefits from a reputation cultivated over nearly 2 decades and its overall family-friendly accessibility. Original movies like Free Guy and Knives Out aren't typically expected to reach the same figures. In fact, both of these movies were considered financial successes, despite still falling short of Chris Evans' lowest-grossing MCU movie, Captain America: The First Avenger, which grossed $370 million worldwide in the earliest days of the MCU. Unfortunately, it is difficult to ascertain how much more Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, would have fared compared to the prequel, as it was only in theaters short of expectations. Although Lightyear was generally well received by critics and audiences, several factors conspired to make it one of Pixar's lowest-grossing movies. In 2022, audiences were generally accustomed to seeing Disney Pixar movies appear on Disney Plus immediately, which wasn't the case for Lightyear. The movie also faced particularly stiff competition, with Jurassic World Dominion, Top Gun, Maverick, and Minions, The Rise of Gru all releasing around the same time. It was additionally a confusing Pixar installment for Toy Story fans, as it was a spin-off film within a film instead of a direct prequel or sequel. Red One was a straight-up flop. Chris Evans's recent Christmas movie, headlined by Hollywood superstar Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, only grossed $186 million against a reported budget of at least $200 million. While it was evidently expected to dominate the holiday season box office, generally unfavorable reviews from critics likely quashed any momentum it might have gained from its star-studded cast and kid-friendly spectacle. Red One proved to be particularly divisive, with its audience score on Rotten Tomatoes sitting at a highly respectable 90%, though this simply did not translate to ticket sales in 2024. If Chris Evans was particularly concerned about banking as much as possible in the next few years, then he might be tempted back to a role in Avengers, Doomsday and/or Avengers, Secret Wars. The fact that none of his recent movies' box offices come close to the inordinately vast box office gross of his most recent MCU movies would leap at the chance to contribute to yet another $1 billion movie. Then again, his recent acting choices might tell a different story entirely. Chris Evans's star power has been significantly bolstered by his MCU career, and it stands to reason that he would be one of Hollywood's most in-demand actors now that he has ostensibly left the MCU. Nevertheless, Red One notwithstanding, Chris Evans doesn't appear to be especially concerned with securing acting credits for surefire blockbusters, and is instead more liable to have fun and focus on creativity and range. His upcoming movie, Honey Don't, directed by Ethan Coen, in which he plays cult leader Reverend Drew Devlin, is indicative of this. Furthermore, Chris Evans has already stated that he is happily retired from the MCU and would only return if it felt particularly justified, while it therefore isn't impossible that he would return as a Captain America variant in Avengers, Doomsday or Avengers, Secret Wars. It doesn't seem to be a surefire bet, regardless of its profitability. Still, until further details about the multiverse saga's climax emerge, Chris Evans fans can only hope that he will reprise his iconic MCU role.